What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? Emily Harper never imagined her life would take a sudden, sharp turn on an otherwise ordinary morning in a tiny diner nestled in a quiet Ohio town. The diner, a weathered building with chipped paint and neon signs flickering faintly, was the kind of place where the same few customers trickled in daily, ordering coffee and comfort food, chatting quietly or staring out the window at a world that seemed to have forgotten them. Emily wiped down tables with practiced hands, her mind clouded with worry about rent, bills, and the mounting debt that clung to the diner like a stubborn shadow. She was barely 28, but the weight of adult responsibilities had aged her beyond her years. Dreams she once had, of astronomy, of traveling far beyond this small town, felt like distant stars, bright but unreachable. She had put those dreams on hold after her mother's health began to decline and her father had long since walked away from the family, leaving an emptiness that still ached in the quiet moments. On this particular morning, the bell above the diner door jingled unexpectedly, breaking the monotony. Emily glanced up and froze. There, stepping into the dim light, was Elon Musk. The man whose name was synonymous with innovation, space exploration, and daring ventures that most people only read about online or in magazines. His presence in this humble diner seemed like something out of a dream, or maybe a strange twist of fate. He moved with a calm confidence, casually dressed but unmistakably him, and he took a seat at the counter, ordering a simple black coffee and a plate of eggs and toast. Emily's heart pounded in her chest, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared his order. The other customers barely noticed, their world small and self-contained, but for Emily, the moment felt monumental. What was he doing here, miles away from the tech hubs and spaceports? As she placed the plate before him, their eyes met briefly, and Elon smiled, a quick, knowing smile that somehow carried warmth and mystery at once. When he finished, Elon left a generous tip but also slid a small folded note across the counter. Emily's curiosity overpowered her hesitation, and she unfolded the paper with trembling fingers. The note was brief but loaded with meaning. It spoke of opportunity, belief, and a future Emily hadn't dared to imagine for herself. The words struck a chord deep within her, words that seemed to reach past the pain and doubt she carried every day. Tears welled up in her eyes, blurring the ink and threatening to spill over. She tried to hold them back, but the floodgates opened, and the tears escaped. Not just tears of joy or surprise, but tears of relief, hope, and something she hadn't felt in a long time, validation. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emily thought to herself, silently pleading for some sign that she wasn't alone in her struggles. In that quiet diner, with the morning sun casting long shadows through the windows, Emily Harper's life shifted. The diner with its cracked vinyl booths and flickering neon was more than just a backdrop, it was the stage for a moment that would challenge everything she believed about herself and her future. As she folded the note carefully and tucked it into her apron pocket, she couldn't stop replaying the words in her mind. The promise of something bigger, the possibility of escape from the rut she felt trapped in. The reality was harsh. Emily was barely scraping by. The diner was on the brink of closure, her mother's medical bills were piling up, and her boyfriend Mark, once a steady source of support, had grown distant and resentful of her dreams. Yet here was this strange, unexpected glimmer of hope. The kind of hope that didn't come from within herself alone but from an outsider who had no reason to believe in her, except that maybe he saw something she hadn't yet recognized. That day, Emily felt a surge of courage, fragile but fierce. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand, took a deep breath, and stepped outside the diner for a moment, letting the crisp morning air fill her lungs. She looked up at the sky, the vast blue stretching endlessly above, and thought of the stars she used to study as a kid, dreaming of worlds beyond her reach. Was this note from Elon Musk a turning point or just a cruel tease? Could one stranger's words really change the course of a life weighed down by hardship? The uncertainty was terrifying but strangely exhilarating. Emily's tears were not just about the note, but all the times she'd felt invisible, overlooked, and defeated. They were tears of release for the years she'd fought to hold herself together, for the sacrifices made and the dreams deferred. The moment felt sacred, as if the universe had conspired to place this chance in her hands, demanding she decide what to do next. Around her, the diner buzzed softly, the clink of dishes, the murmur of conversations, but Emily was suspended in a bubble of quiet intensity. She couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead and whether she had the strength to step into a future unknown. What if she failed? What if this was just a cruel joke fate was playing on her? But deep down, beneath the fear and doubt, something whispered yes. Yes to hope, yes to risk, yes to a new beginning. She couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead and whether she had the strength to step into a future unknown. What if she failed? What if this was just a cruel joke fate was playing on her? But deep down, beneath the fear and doubt, something whispered yes. Yes to hope, yes to risk, yes to a new beginning. And in that single moment, Emily Harper realized that sometimes life's biggest changes come when you least expect them, wrapped in the simplest acts, like serving a stranger a meal, or reading a note left on a check. The question remained, would she take the leap or retreat back into the safety of what she knew? The answer would come soon enough. For now, she clung to the fragile spark lit inside her heart and dared to believe that maybe, just maybe, her story was about to change forever. Childhood dreams. Emily Harper's story didn't start in that small diner on a quiet Ohio morning, it began many years earlier, under a vast sky full of stars. Growing up in a modest two-bedroom house on the outskirts of Columbus, Emily was the kind of kid who saw the world a little differently. While other children played sports or chased the latest trends, Emily spent her evenings with her nose pressed against a telescope, dreaming of galaxies far beyond her reach. Her mother, Susan, worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and the house warm, but she always made time to encourage Emily's curiosity. "Look up, Emily," she would say, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "There's so much out there waiting for you." Those words became a quiet anthem in Emily's heart. Her father, James, had been a different story. He was charming but unreliable, a man who promised more than he ever delivered. When Emily was just 8 years old, James left without warning, vanishing like a shooting star, bright for a moment, then gone. That abandonment carved a deep scar in Emily's young soul, sowing seeds of mistrust that lingered into adulthood. Despite the pain, Susan remained a pillar of strength, balancing work, school events, and late-night talks that helped Emily navigate her confusing emotions. Emily's closest friend growing up was Mia, a bubbly girl with an infectious laugh and a knack for getting into trouble. Together, they imagined adventures beyond their small town, often lying on the grass staring at constellations, whispering secrets about what the future might hold. But as high school approached, those dreams began to feel more fragile. Money was tight, and the pressures of adult life crept closer. Emily watched her mother sacrifice to keep their lives afloat, which made Emily determined to find a way out, to reach for something greater than the quiet desperation around her. When Emily graduated, she had earned a modest scholarship to study astronomy at a state college, but the cost of living and her mother's health forced her to stay home. Instead, she took the first job she could find, a waitress position at her town's diner. The job wasn't glamorous, and the pay barely covered bills, but it gave her a way to contribute. Still, Emily never lost her fascination with the stars. Every night, after her shift, she would sit on the back porch with her battered telescope, seeking comfort in the cosmos. Her dreams simmered quietly beneath the surface, waiting for a chance to be rekindled. Family dinners with her mother were often bittersweet. Susan's tired smile masked the toll years of hard work had taken on her body. "You have to keep believing, Emily," Susan said one evening, passing a cup of tea across the table. "No matter how dark it gets." Emily clung to those words, though sometimes it was hard not to feel overwhelmed. Her relationship with Mark, her boyfriend since high school, added another layer of complexity. Mark was a good man, steady and practical, but he didn't share Emily's dreams. His idea of success was stability, a steady paycheck, a home they could afford. Their conversations often ended in frustration when Emily spoke of ambitions beyond their small town and Mark urged her to be realistic. Yet, beneath the tension was genuine care. Mark worried about Emily burning out, about the pain she might face if her dreams didn't come true. Despite the conflicts, Emily believed in love and family, in the hope that they could bridge the gaps between them. Inside her, a quiet fire burned, a desire to prove that she could be more than her circumstances, to break free from the cycle of sacrifice and disappointment. Memories of her father's departure haunted her, making her wary of trusting others completely, but also fueling a fierce independence. Her mother's sacrifices inspired resilience, and her own longing for the stars sparked a restless energy she couldn't ignore. That restless energy was what carried her through long shifts at the diner, through the nights spent worrying over bills, and the quiet moments when she allowed herself to hope. Emily's past was a complicated tapestry of love, loss, and dreams deferred, but it was also the foundation on which she would build the rest of her story. She wasn't just a waitress serving coffee and eggs, she was a woman with a heart full of hope and a mind full of questions about what lay beyond the horizon. And as Elon Musk's note had reminded her, sometimes the universe gives you a sign when you least expect it. Emily's past shaped her, yes, but it did not define her. The choice to keep reaching, to keep dreaming, was hers alone. And in that choice lay the first true step toward whatever came next. Emily's present life, Emily Harper's life, as it stood now, was a delicate balancing act between survival and hope. The diner where she worked, the Rusty Spoon, was a small, family-run place with peeling wallpaper, neon signs buzzing softly, and a loyal but shrinking customer base. Every morning, Emily slipped on her worn apron, tied her hair back, and prepared to face another long day of taking orders, wiping tables, and juggling the endless demands of customers who barely noticed her beyond the routine service she provided. The work was exhausting, but it paid the bills, or at least it tried to. The diner's owner, Mr. Thompson, a gruff but kind man in his 60s, had made it clear that things were tight. "If business doesn't pick up soon, we might have to close the doors," he told Emily one slow afternoon, his voice heavy with worry. Emily's stomach clenched. The thought of losing this place, this fragile thread holding her and the town together, was almost too much to bear. Beyond the diner's faded booths and chipped coffee mugs, Emily's personal life was a maze of complicated emotions and difficult decisions. Her mother's health was declining steadily, and medical bills piled higher each month. Susan's spirit remained strong, but Emily could see the toll it was taking. Every phone call with her mother was filled with reassurances and gentle reminders to keep going, but beneath it all lay a silent fear that time was running out. Then there was Mark. Their relationship, once filled with laughter and easy companionship, had grown strained under the weight of their diverging paths. Mark worked at the local factory, a steady job with a predictable paycheck, and he valued security above all else. He loved Emily, but his patience wore thin when she talked about dreams that seemed impossible in their small town. "Why can't you just be happy here?" he asked during a rare argument one evening. "Why chase after some star that's never going to shine for us?" Emily's heart ached every time they clashed, but she couldn't give up on the part of herself that longed for something more. Her dreams weren't just fantasies, they were lifelines. When she wasn't working, Emily spent time at home caring for her mother or alone in her small bedroom, surrounded by astronomy books and sketches of distant planets. She kept a battered telescope by the window, a relic from her childhood that reminded her of better days and brighter possibilities. Yet reality was relentless. The bills, the unpaid hours at the diner, the tension with Mark, they all pulled her back into a world that felt impossibly small. There were moments when Emily felt invisible, as if the world had moved on without her, leaving her trapped in a cycle she couldn't escape. But even in the darkest moments, a quiet hope simmered beneath the surface. She thought of the note Elon Musk had left on the check that morning, the promise of something new hidden in a few simple words. It felt like a lifeline thrown across an ocean of doubt. That note wasn't just a message, it was a challenge. A push to step outside the boundaries of the life she'd known and dare to imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, but thriving. The rusty spoon was more than a job, it was a symbol of everything Emily wanted to protect. The diner was a gathering place for the community, a place where stories were shared and laughter sometimes spilled over the clatter of plates. Closing it would mean more than losing a paycheck, it would mean losing a piece of home, a connection to the people who still believed in the small town despite its struggles. Every shift, Emily worked harder, hoping to bring in more customers, to keep the place alive. She stayed late, scrubbing floors and restocking supplies, even when her muscles ached and her spirit felt worn thin. And every day, she carried the quiet burden of wondering if this was all she was meant to be, waiting tables in a fading diner while the stars she dreamed of remained just out of reach. But that note, that moment with Elon Musk, had planted a seed of possibility. Maybe there was a way out. Maybe her story wasn't over. As the diner's neon sign buzzed softly in the early evening light, Emily wiped her hands on her apron and looked around the empty booths. She thought about the journey ahead, uncertain and daunting, but hers to take. Mark called her later that night. His voice was tired, but he sounded softer than usual. "Emily, maybe you're chasing something that isn't real. But whatever you decide, I want you to be happy." It wasn't the reassurance she wanted, but it was enough to remind her she wasn't completely alone. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would be fights and heartbreak, moments of doubt and fear. But for the first time in a long while, Emily felt the stirrings of something new, a hope that refused to be extinguished. The stars outside her window twinkled with silent encouragement. Maybe, just maybe, they were waiting for her to reach for them. Rising conflict. The days after Elon Musk's visit to the Rusty Spoon were filled with a strange mix of excitement and anxiety for Emily Harper. The note he had left tucked beneath the check was a lifeline, but also a challenge she hadn't expected. Every time she unfolded it, she felt both hope and fear swirling inside her. The message hinted at an opportunity, something about a new project, a chance for people with big ideas and determination, but the details were vague, almost like a test of her courage to step forward. Emily found herself distracted during shifts, replaying the encounter in her mind and wondering if it had been real or a trick of her imagination. Her coworkers noticed the change in her, the way she smiled a little more, yet also seemed distant at times. Mr. Thompson, the diner's owner, pulled her aside one afternoon. "Emily, you seem different," he said, eyes sharp but kind. "Whatever's going on, just don't forget why you're here. We need you." Emily nodded, torn between loyalty to the diner and the restless pull of the unknown. Meanwhile, tensions with Mark grew. The small apartment they shared felt cramped, not just physically but emotionally. One evening, after a quiet dinner, the conversation erupted. "Emily, you're chasing a dream that's killing us," Mark said, frustration and fear etched across his face. "I'm trying to keep us afloat, but you're never here. You're always somewhere else." Emily's heart ached. "I'm trying to find a way out, Mark. For both of us. Don't you want more? More? What about now? What about what we have?" Mark's voice cracked. The argument ended with heavy silence, but the damage was done. Emily felt the sting of loneliness more sharply than ever. On top of this, her mother's condition worsened. Susan's doctor had delivered the news gently but clearly: her illness was progressing faster than expected, and the treatments were costly and draining. Emily found herself caught between shifts at the diner, caring for her mother, and trying to unravel the mystery of Elon Musk's note. One night, she sat at her kitchen table, surrounded by medical bills and the crumpled note, her hands shaking. The weight of responsibility pressed down on her, threatening to crush the fragile hope she'd clung to. But then, a text arrived. It was from an unknown number, a short message that read, "We saw your note. Ready when you are. Reply, yes, to begin." Emily's breath caught. This was it, the moment she'd been waiting for. She stared at her phone, heart pounding. Saying yes meant stepping into a world she barely understood, leaving behind everything familiar and safe. But saying no meant staying trapped in a life that felt like slowly sinking in quicksand. With trembling fingers, she typed yes and hit send. Immediately, a reply came with instructions: meet at a location downtown at dawn. The place was an old warehouse repurposed for tech startups, a stark contrast to her small town and the diner she loved. As dawn broke, Emily stood outside the building, nerves jangling like electric currents. Inside, a small group of people gathered, all strangers, each with their own stories and dreams. A tall man with a calm voice welcomed them, explaining that this was a pilot program designed to find and support undiscovered talent, a chance to work on innovative projects with guidance from experts in various fields. For Emily, it felt surreal, a step into a world she'd only seen from afar. The days that followed were intense. Workshops, brainstorming sessions, challenges designed to test creativity and resilience. Emily poured herself into the work, fueled by a mixture of fear and excitement. But old doubts crept in. Was she really smart enough? Could someone like her, from a tiny diner in Ohio, compete with these bright minds? The conflict wasn't just external. Inside Emily, a battle raged between the comfort of what she knew and the promise of what could be. The tension with Mark didn't ease. He grew more distant, accusing her of abandoning him and the life they'd built together. "You're changing, Emily. I don't know who you are anymore," he said one night, voice thick with hurt. Emily wanted to explain, to bridge the gap, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she held her ground, realizing that some parts of her had to change if she wanted to grow. Friends at the diner tried to support her, but some worried she was chasing a fantasy, afraid she'd be crushed by disappointment. The Rusty Spoon itself felt the strain as Emily spent more time away, and business faltered. One afternoon, Mr. Thompson pulled her aside again. "Emily, I get that this is your shot, but don't forget us here. The diner, the people, it's all part of who you are." His words hit hard. Emily understood she couldn't run from her roots, even as she reached for the stars. The climax of this chapter came unexpectedly. During a group project, Emily's idea was rejected by a panel of experts, leaving her feeling exposed and vulnerable. The sting of failure was sharp, echoing the pain of past disappointments. But in that low moment, a fellow participant reached out, offering encouragement and reminding her that every setback was a step forward. That small act of kindness reignited Emily's resolve. She realized the journey wouldn't be smooth, but she was no longer alone. The tension between hope and hardship, love and loss, fear and courage defined this stage of her story. Emily stood at a crossroads, battered but unbroken, ready to face whatever came next. Climactic journey. The dawn light filtered through the dusty windows of the old warehouse, casting long shadows on the polished concrete floor. Emily stood at the edge of the room, her heart pounding like a drumbeat that echoed the rhythm of her uncertain future. The program she'd joined, initially shrouded in mystery, had now unfolded into a whirlwind of challenges, breakthroughs, and unexpected friendships. Each day was a test of her resolve, pushing her beyond what she thought possible. The tall man who welcomed the group at the beginning, Jameson, had become a mentor figure, his calm demeanor a steadying force amid the chaos. "This isn't just about talent," he told them during one of the early sessions. "It's about grit, about who can rise when everything tries to pull you down." Emily took those words to heart, fueling her determination. The project assigned to her team was ambitious, designing a sustainable, affordable energy solution for rural communities. It was a task that hit close to home for Emily, whose Ohio town struggled with outdated infrastructure and limited resources. She poured herself into research, brainstorming ways to harness renewable energy that could transform places like hers. The days blurred together, filled with long hours, heated debates, and bursts of creativity. Emily discovered strengths she hadn't known she possessed, an ability to inspire others, to connect ideas in unexpected ways. But the journey was far from easy. The pressure mounted as deadlines loomed, and the stakes felt impossibly high. Tensions flared within the group. One evening, during a particularly stressful meeting, disagreements boiled over. Voices rose, accusations flew, and Emily found herself caught in the middle, struggling to keep the fragile unity intact. Outside the program, her personal life frayed further. Mark's silence deepened into absence. Their apartment felt colder, emptier, a stark contrast to the warmth Emily craved but couldn't find. Her mother's health took a sudden turn for the worse, forcing Emily to juggle hospital visits and urgent calls while trying to keep her commitment to the program. Exhaustion settled into her bones, but she refused to give in. She reminded herself why she had said yes, the promise of a better future, not just for herself but for the people she loved. One night, after a grueling day, Emily sat on the rooftop of the warehouse building, staring up at the stars she'd dreamed of since childhood. The sky stretched endlessly above, a vast canvas of possibilities. She whispered to herself, "I'm still here. I'm still trying." It was in these quiet moments that Emily found the strength to keep going. Then came the unexpected opportunity that would change everything. The program announced a partnership with a leading tech company working on an innovative prototype. Participants were invited to pitch their ideas for a chance to contribute directly to the project. Emily's heart raced. This was the moment she'd been waiting for, the chance to prove herself beyond doubt. She crafted her pitch carefully, weaving together technical details with personal stories about her town, her mother, and her dreams. When the day arrived, Emily stepped onto the stage, her voice steady despite the pounding in her chest. She spoke of resilience, community, and the power of innovation to change lives. The audience listened intently, and when she finished, the room erupted in applause. Among the panel of judges was a familiar face, someone connected to Elon Musk's network, whose nod of approval felt like a silent promise of new beginnings. Yet, even as Emily savored the victory, a new challenge emerged. An anonymous email questioned the feasibility of her ideas, sparking doubt among some team members. The seeds of mistrust threatened to unravel the progress they'd made. Emily faced the harsh reality that success was never straightforward. The path forward was tangled with setbacks and skepticism. But instead of retreating, she confronted the criticism head-on, inviting open dialogue and transparency. Her honesty earned respect and helped rebuild trust within the group. As weeks passed, the prototype began to take shape, a tangible symbol of their collective effort and Emily's determination. The warehouse, once a place of uncertainty, transformed into a hub of hope and possibility. Through it all, Emily's own transformation deepened. The shy, uncertain waitress from Ohio was becoming a leader, a voice for those who felt unseen. The journey was exhausting and fraught with emotional turmoil, but it was also exhilarating. Emily learned that growth required vulnerability, that asking for help was a strength, and that failure was simply part of the process. Her past, the abandonment by her father, her mother's struggles, her fractured relationship with Mark, no longer defined her. Instead, they fueled her resilience and compassion. The chapter closed with Emily standing before a crowd of supporters from the program, her mother sitting proudly in the front row despite her frailty. Tears glistened in Susan's eyes as Emily shared the story of their journey, of hope born from hardship. "This is just the beginning," Emily said softly, her voice steady. "The stars are still out there, and I'm reaching for them." In that moment, the impossible felt within reach, and Emily's world expanded beyond the limits she once believed were fixed. The climactic journey was far from over, but she had taken the first brave steps into a future shaped by courage, connection, and unyielding hope. Emotional climax. The weight of everything Emily Harper had been carrying pressed heavily on her shoulders as she stepped into the conference room filled with bright lights and expectant faces. The program's final presentation was not just a showcase of innovation, it was a reckoning. Months of hard work, sacrifices, heartbreaks, and quiet moments of doubt all led to this pivotal moment. As she glanced across the room, Emily caught sight of her mother sitting bravely in the front row, Susan's pale face illuminated by the glow of the screen. It was the first time Emily had brought her mother to a public event since her illness worsened. Her presence was a reminder of why Emily fought so hard to make this dream a reality. The audience hushed as Emily took the stage. She began by sharing the story that fueled her passion, the small Ohio town struggling to keep the lights on, her mother's failing health, and the note from Elon Musk that sparked a leap into the unknown. Her voice trembled but grew stronger with each word. Then came the demonstration of their prototype, a compact and affordable solar energy device designed for rural communities. The crowd leaned in, captivated by the seamless blend of technology and heart behind the project. The judges asked tough questions, probing the feasibility and impact of the design. Emily responded with clarity and conviction, drawing on months of research and collaboration. But the moment that shook her to the core was the announcement that the project would receive significant funding, enough to bring it to market and expand its reach. Tears blurred her vision as she realized the enormity of what lay ahead. Yet, amid the joy, a whisper of doubt lingered. The success felt surreal, almost too good to be true. That night, Emily sat alone in her apartment, the weight of the day settling over her like a storm cloud. The phone rang. Mark's voice was soft, almost apologetic. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe I was wrong to hold you back. I want to support you now, Emily. Whatever comes next." The words brought a rush of conflicting emotions, relief, hope, but also fear. Could she trust that this was a new beginning, or was it too late to mend what had frayed? Meanwhile, her mother's condition deteriorated further, requiring a round-the-clock caretaker. Emily felt torn between the demands of the program and her responsibility at home. One evening, overwhelmed and exhausted, she broke down, her tears a mixture of grief and relief. It was in this moment of vulnerability that a colleague stepped in, a woman named Laura who had become a close friend. Laura listened without judgment, offering comfort and practical help. "You're not alone, Emily," she said gently. "We're in this together." The emotional climax deepened as Emily confronted the truth she had avoided: she couldn't do it all alone. Accepting help was not a weakness but a bridge to resilience. As the program's final weeks unfolded, Emily balanced hospital visits, late-night work sessions, and moments of quiet reflection. She found strength in the small victories, the smile from her mother, the encouragement from her team, the growing buzz around their project. The story culminated in a community event back in her hometown, where the first prototype was unveiled. The local residents gathered, their faces a mix of skepticism and hope. Emily stood before them, sharing not just a product but a promise, a vision of brighter days powered by innovation and collective effort. The emotional climax was a powerful crescendo of joy, sorrow, and determination. Emily's journey had brought her full circle, from a waitress serving strangers to a woman leading a movement that could change lives. The lessons she learned were clear: love requires sacrifice, dreams demand courage, and hope shines brightest in the darkest moments. As the crowd applauded, Emily felt a profound sense of peace. The future was uncertain, but for the first time, she believed she had the strength to face it. The stars outside her window no longer felt distant. They were part of her story now, symbols of endless possibility, waiting to be reached. Turning point: the success of the prototype's unveiling back in her hometown marked a pivotal moment for Emily Harper, but it was only the beginning of a new chapter filled with complex challenges and unforeseen choices. The excitement that had propelled her forward now collided with the harsh realities of what it meant to transform a dream into lasting change. As Emily returned to the rhythm of her daily life, the euphoria of accomplishment gradually gave way to an intense pressure that tested every fiber of her being. Investors showed interest, offers were made, and the project's visibility soared beyond anything she had imagined. But with opportunity came scrutiny and demands that stretched her capacity. Meetings stretched late into the night, contracts required careful negotiation, and the pressure to deliver tangible results mounted with each passing day. Meanwhile, the fragile balance in her personal life began to wobble dangerously. Mark's tentative support had softened their divide, but wounds ran deep, and the past lingered like a shadow between them. Conversations that once flowed freely became strained and guarded. Emily wrestled with feelings of guilt and frustration. How could she ask for support when she was simultaneously pushing him away? Her mother's health continued to decline, and the need for constant care weighed heavily on Emily's heart. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings, she sat by Susan's bedside in the hospital, holding her hand as frailty shadowed the familiar warmth she had always depended on. The impending loss loomed like an unspoken truth, pressing on Emily's spirit with relentless force. Yet amid this turmoil, a new spark ignited. During a late-night brainstorming session with her team, Emily had an idea that shifted their approach, an innovative twist to the prototype that could not only generate power but also store it more efficiently, making it accessible even during outages. The breakthrough reignited the team's enthusiasm and renewed the momentum of the project. It was a reminder that setbacks and pressure could birth creativity and resilience. But with progress came conflict. Some team members, pressured by deadlines and investor expectations, pushed for shortcuts and compromises that clashed with Emily's vision of integrity and community impact. Tensions flared as she stood firm, advocating for the values that had brought her this far. The struggle was exhausting, but it solidified Emily's role as a leader who refused to sacrifice purpose for profit. The turning point came unexpectedly during a late-night call with Jameson, the mentor who had guided her from the start. He challenged Emily to redefine success, not just as financial gain or public recognition, but as the ability to inspire change and uplift others. "You're not just building a product," he reminded her. "You're building a legacy." Those words settled deeply within her. Emily realized she needed to recalibrate her priorities, to embrace the imperfections and uncertainties as part of a larger journey. She reached out to Mark, honest and vulnerable in a way she hadn't been before, sharing fears and hopes without expectation. Their conversation marked a fragile but meaningful step toward healing. At home, she made peace with her mother's condition, choosing to cherish every moment they had left rather than dwell in fear. The community's response to the project grew stronger. Local leaders invited Emily to speak at town halls and schools, inspiring others to believe in the power of innovation rooted in real lives. The diner, too, found new life as people returned, drawn by the story of one waitress who dared to dream. Emily's transformation was no longer just professional, it was deeply personal. The chapter closed with her standing at the edge of the town's small park, looking up at the stars that had always guided her. She felt a quiet strength, a readiness to face whatever challenges lay ahead with open heart and steady resolve. The turning point was not an end but a new beginning, one forged from the fires of struggle and tempered by hope. Deepening struggles. The weeks following the turning point brought a storm of new challenges that tested Emily Harper's endurance and spirit like never before. Though the project was gaining traction, the personal cost was mounting, and the delicate balance she had fought to maintain began to unravel in unexpected ways. The early excitement that had filled her with boundless energy now felt like a distant memory, replaced by exhaustion that seeped into every part of her life. The demands of managing the growing project pulled her deeper into meetings, negotiations, and endless revisions. Investor calls filled her mornings, and her evenings were spent poring over design tweaks or crisis management with her team. Sleep became a luxury she could rarely afford. At home, the situation with Mark deteriorated further. His initial willingness to support her dream gave way to feelings of resentment and abandonment. One cold evening, after a terse conversation, Mark slammed the door behind him, leaving Emily alone with the echo of their fractured relationship. The apartment, once a refuge, now felt like a cage where unspoken grievances and broken promises hovered in the air. Emily's heart ached with loneliness she hadn't fully acknowledged until that moment. Her mother's health continued to worsen, and hospital visits became more frequent. The weight of watching Susan's strength fade was a shadow that darkened Emily's every step. Yet, she pushed herself harder, afraid that slowing down would mean losing everything she had worked for. Guilt gnawed at her. She wondered if she was neglecting the people she loved in her pursuit of a future that might never come. The project itself encountered unforeseen hurdles. Technical problems delayed progress, and the pressure from investors to produce quick results created tension within the team. Some members began to question Emily's leadership, suggesting a more aggressive approach that conflicted with her commitment to ethical innovation. The disagreement sometimes erupted into heated arguments, fracturing the once cohesive group. One particularly tense meeting ended with a close colleague resigning, citing burnout and disillusionment. This loss hit Emily hard, shaking her confidence and deepening her sense of isolation. Despite these setbacks, Emily refused to give up. She reached out to Laura, her closest ally in the program, who provided both practical support and emotional grounding. Laura reminded her that resilience didn't mean going it alone. It meant knowing when to lean on others. With renewed determination, Emily began delegating responsibilities more, trusting her team to share the load. Yet, the cost of leadership weighed heavily. One night, overwhelmed by exhaustion and grief, Emily found herself on the kitchen floor, tears streaming down her face as she grappled with the enormity of everything. It was a raw, unfiltered moment that stripped away the veneer of strength she had worn for so long. In that vulnerability, she discovered a glimmer of healing. Friends from the diner, sensing her struggle, reached out with offers of help, meals, company, even financial support. The small town that had once seemed distant now rallied around her in quiet, meaningful ways. Meanwhile, Mark reached out sporadically, each call a reminder of the fractures that lingered between them. Emily realized that some relationships, no matter how important, couldn't be forced back into place. Acceptance became a painful but necessary step. The emotional toll of this chapter was immense, but so was the growth it inspired. Emily learned to embrace imperfection, to acknowledge that failure and struggle were part of the path, not signs of defeat. She found strength in community and in moments of quiet self-compassion. As the chapter drew to a close, Emily stood once again on the rooftop, gazing at the night sky. The stars were distant but constant, a reminder that even in darkness, there was light to guide her. She whispered a promise to herself, to keep going, to keep believing, even when the road was hardest. The deepening struggles were not the end of her story but the crucible that would shape her into the woman she was becoming. New horizons. The dawn broke gently over Emily Harper's small Ohio town, casting a warm golden light across the familiar streets she had once felt confined by but now saw with new eyes. After months of relentless struggle, heartbreak, and growth, a new chapter began to unfold, one filled with possibilities that stretched far beyond the boundaries of her past. The project's prototype had finally passed the rigorous testing phase, drawing praise from experts and investors alike. This breakthrough opened doors that once seemed firmly shut, offering Emily and her team a chance to scale their innovation and reach communities across the country. Invitations poured in, conferences, interviews, speaking engagements, and Emily found herself stepping onto stages she had never imagined entering. Each time she spoke, she carried not just the story of her technology, but the deeper narrative of resilience, hope, and the power of dreaming against the odds. The excitement was palpable, but Emily approached these opportunities with a grounded perspective forged in hardship. She knew success wasn't guaranteed, and that every step forward would require unwavering commitment and adaptability. At home, the atmosphere had shifted as well. Susan's health, while still fragile, had stabilized enough for Emily to focus more on her work without the constant anxiety that had clouded the previous months. Mark, though no longer part of her daily life, had faded into a chapter of the past, an experience that had shaped her but no longer defined her. New friendships blossomed, especially with Laura and other members of the program who had become like family. Their shared journey created bonds that offered support and inspiration during the inevitable highs and lows. Emily's role evolved too, from a passionate innovator to a leader and mentor. She found joy in guiding younger participants in the program, encouraging them to pursue their visions with courage and integrity. This new purpose infused her days with meaning beyond personal achievement. One particularly memorable moment came during a visit to a rural community in Appalachia, where the prototype was being installed. Emily stood alongside local residents, witnessing firsthand how the technology transformed lives, lighting homes, powering schools, and opening doors to new opportunities. The gratitude and hope in their eyes reaffirmed the importance of her work. But with these new horizons came fresh challenges. The pressure to maintain momentum intensified, as did the scrutiny from media and critics. Emily faced moments of doubt, wondering if she could sustain the pace without losing herself. It was during one quiet evening, as she reviewed project updates in her office, that she received an unexpected message, an invitation to meet with Elon Musk himself. The note was brief but unmistakably genuine, a request to discuss the project's potential and explore collaboration. The prospect stirred a mix of excitement and nerves. Meeting the man whose note had sparked this entire journey felt surreal, a full-circle moment charged with possibility. As the day of the meeting approached, Emily reflected on how far she had come, from a waitress serving coffee to a woman shaping the future of renewable energy. The lessons learned, the sacrifices made, and the relationships forged all converged into a powerful narrative of transformation. The meeting itself was intense and inspiring. Elon Musk's presence was commanding, but he listened attentively as Emily presented their work, asked probing questions, and offered insights that challenged her thinking. The conversation stretched into hours, filled with brainstorming, honest feedback, and mutual respect. By the end, a partnership was formed, a commitment to bring the innovation to a global stage, expanding its reach and impact. Walking out of that office, Emily felt a surge of hope and responsibility. The path ahead was still uncertain, but the possibilities were vast. As she looked up at the sky that evening, the stars seemed to shine brighter than ever, symbols of the new horizons waiting to be explored. Emily whispered a promise to herself. To keep pushing boundaries, to stay true to her values, and to never forget the journey that had brought her here. The story was far from over, but the future gleamed with the light of endless possibility. The weight of expectations, the excitement of new opportunities and partnerships brought a surge of energy to Emily Harper's world, but beneath the surface, the weight of expectations began to settle heavily on her shoulders. The meeting with Elon Musk marked a turning point, a doorway to a larger stage, but it also ushered in a new set of pressures that threatened to overwhelm her resolve. In the weeks following the announcement of their collaboration, Emily found her schedule consumed by a relentless whirlwind of commitments. Investor briefings, media interviews, project planning sessions, and community outreach all competed for her attention. The line between work and personal life blurred until it disappeared entirely. Each day began before sunrise and stretched long past midnight, leaving her little time to rest or reflect. Despite the growing recognition, Emily struggled with the sense that she had to constantly prove herself, not just as a capable innovator, but as someone worthy of the spotlight and trust. The media painted her as a symbol of hope and resilience, but Emily knew the story was more complicated. Behind every success were moments of doubt, fatigue, and sacrifice that rarely made the headlines. The pressure to maintain a flawless image weighed heavily on her mental and emotional health. At home, the toll was just as real. Susan's condition continued to demand care, and Emily grappled with the guilt of not being able to be present as much as she wanted. Friends and colleagues rallied around her, but loneliness crept in during the quiet hours when exhaustion gave way to worry. Mark's departure had left a void that was hard to fill. Though she had moved on, the memories of their fractured relationship haunted her, a reminder of the personal costs of ambition. Within the project team, cracks began to appear. The initial enthusiasm gave way to stress and frustration as deadlines loomed and expectations mounted. Some members questioned decisions, while others struggled with burnout. Emily found herself mediating conflicts and striving to keep morale intact, a role that sapped her energy but felt necessary. One night, after an especially difficult day, Emily sat alone in her apartment, staring at the ceiling and feeling the crushing weight of responsibility. Doubts flooded her mind. Was she doing enough? Was the dream worth the cost? Could she sustain this pace without breaking? In that vulnerable moment, she reached out to Laura, her closest confidant. Their conversation was a lifeline, a space to share fears, frustrations, and hopes without judgment. Laura reminded her that vulnerability was strength, not weakness, and encouraged her to seek balance and support. Gradually, Emily began to set boundaries, carving out moments for self-care and reconnecting with loved ones. She learned to delegate more, trusting her capable team to share the load. Still, the tension between public expectation and personal reality remained a constant struggle. The media spotlight grew brighter, with interviews and features casting Emily as a trailblazer. While proud of the recognition, she sometimes felt like a character in a story written by others, her true self obscured behind headlines and soundbites. One particularly harsh article criticized the project's pace and questioned whether a young woman from a small town could manage such a massive undertaking. The words stung deeply, but Emily refused to let them define her. Instead, she used the criticism as fuel to prove skeptics wrong, channeling her determination into renewed focus and innovation. The emotional tension culminated during a high-stakes investor meeting where Emily was expected to present a progress report. As she spoke, she felt the weight of every expectation, the hopes of her hometown, the vision of her team, the scrutiny of powerful stakeholders. Her voice wavered at times, but she pressed on, honesty and passion shining through. The presentation was met with cautious optimism, but the road ahead remained uncertain. That night, Emily reflected on the journey, how far she had come, the battles fought, and the lessons learned. She realized that leadership was not about perfection but resilience, not about never falling but about rising each time. The chapter closed with Emily standing by the window, gazing at the stars once more. They no longer felt distant or unattainable. Instead, they were beacons, reminders that even under the heaviest weight, light could break through. Emily whispered a quiet vow, to carry the weight with grace, to embrace the imperfections, and to keep moving forward with courage and heart. Unexpected alliances. The weight of expectation was heavy on Emily Harper's shoulders, but amid the pressure and endless challenges, unexpected alliances began to form that would reshape her journey in ways she hadn't imagined. It started with a message from a small nonprofit focused on rural education, intrigued by the potential of Emily's solar technology to power schools in underserved areas. The email was brief but heartfelt, expressing hope that together they could make a real difference. Emily saw in this a chance to deepen the impact of her work beyond homes and businesses, to touch the lives of children whose futures depended on access to reliable energy. This outreach sparked a series of conversations and meetings that opened a new horizon of possibilities. Collaborating with the nonprofit meant adapting her project to new contexts and challenges, requiring innovation and flexibility. It also meant building trust with communities in ways that went beyond technology, understanding their stories, needs, and aspirations. Emily embraced the chance to connect on this deeper level, finding renewed purpose amid the technical and financial demands of the project. Alongside this, an unexpected partnership formed with a former competitor from a larger tech company. Initially wary, Emily was surprised by the genuine interest and willingness to collaborate rather than compete. This alliance brought new resources and expertise, but also challenges, negotiating roles, balancing visions, and protecting the values that had defined Emily's journey. Navigating these waters tested her leadership and diplomacy, but also taught her the power of openness and compromise. Meanwhile, personal connections continued to evolve. Laura remained a steadfast friend and confidant, her support unwavering through every high and low. Their bond grew stronger, rooted in mutual respect and shared experience. In moments of doubt or exhaustion, Laura's encouragement reminded Emily she was not alone. Even Mark reached out occasionally, signaling his own process of healing and change. Though the past could not be undone, Emily found peace in forgiving and moving forward. The project's progress continued, marked by milestones that brought both celebration and fresh challenges. A successful pilot program in a remote Appalachian school showcased the technology's potential and impact, drawing media attention and community pride. Yet the logistics of scaling up, securing funding, and managing partnerships remained complex and demanding. Emily's days were a blend of strategic planning, community engagement, and navigating the intricacies of business and innovation. Throughout it all, the emotional landscape shifted. The loneliness that once threatened to consume her receded, replaced by a sense of belonging and shared purpose. She discovered strength not just in herself, but in the networks and relationships that surrounded her. The chapter's emotional core centered on a community event held in the very school where the pilot program had launched. As Emily addressed the crowd, she spoke not only about technology but about hope, resilience, and the power of coming together to create change. The smiles and tears of those listening fueled her determination to keep pushing forward. As night fell and the event wound down, Emily stood outside under a canopy of stars, feeling the weight of the journey but also the lightness of connection. The unexpected alliances had become a source of strength, transforming challenges into opportunities. The stars above, once distant symbols, now felt like a constellation guiding her forward, reminders that no one journeys alone, and that together, even the most daunting dreams could become reality. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The breaking point. Emily Harper's journey had been marked by persistence and hope, but as the demands of her project escalated, she found herself approaching a breaking point she had long feared. The delicate balance between innovation, leadership, and personal life was unraveling under the relentless pressure. The weeks leading up to this moment were a whirlwind of non-stop activity: product development sprints, investor negotiations, public appearances, and community outreach. Every day seemed to blend into the next, each carrying new challenges and urgent deadlines. The fatigue was physical and emotional, creeping into Emily's bones and clouding her once clear vision. Despite her efforts to delegate and prioritize, the weight of responsibility pressed down with increasing intensity. The strain began to manifest in sleepless nights, missed meals, and moments of overwhelming anxiety. Emily struggled to maintain her composure, fearing that any sign of weakness would undermine the confidence others had placed in her. Her relationships, too, bore the scars of neglect. Laura noticed the changes, the forced smiles, the distracted conversations, and urged Emily to slow down, but the demands left little room for rest. Susan's health took a sudden downturn, adding another layer of worry and guilt. Mark's sporadic messages, once a source of tension, now felt like distant echoes from a chapter closed. Then came the crisis. A major technical setback discovered during a crucial phase of testing threatened to derail months of progress. The news hit Emily like a thunderclap. Meetings that had once been productive turned tense and contentious as the team grappled with the implications. Investors grew impatient, media questions sharpened, and the public watched closely. The setback felt personal, a blow not just to the project but to Emily's belief in herself. One night, after a particularly grueling day, Emily found herself alone in the office, the glow of the computer screen casting harsh shadows on tired features. The silence was broken only by the steady tick of the clock and the distant hum of city life. In that solitude, the exhaustion and pressure she had held at bay surged forward, overwhelming her defenses. Tears came unbidden, a release of months of pent-up fear and frustration. For the first time, Emily allowed herself to fully acknowledge the toll of her journey. The breaking point was not just about a failed test, it was about the cumulative weight of sacrifice, expectation, and isolation. The next days were a blur of reflection and difficult decisions. Emily took a brief leave from the project to focus on her well-being and her mother's care. She leaned heavily on Laura and a small circle of trusted friends, finding solace in their support and encouragement. Therapy sessions helped her confront the fears and perfectionism that had driven her to the brink. Gradually, Emily began to rediscover her strength, not as invulnerability but as resilience rooted in vulnerability. The experience reshaped her approach to leadership and life. She embraced the necessity of balance, recognizing that to lead effectively, she needed to care for herself as well as her work. When she returned to the project, Emily brought with her a renewed sense of purpose tempered by wisdom and compassion. The team, inspired by her honesty and determination, rallied with fresh energy and collaboration. Together, they devised new strategies to address the technical challenges, learning from setbacks rather than fearing them. The chapter closed with Emily standing at a community center, addressing a group of young innovators. Her message was candid and hopeful, that failure was not the end but a step toward growth, and that strength came from embracing imperfection. As she looked into the eager faces before her, Emily felt a profound connection, a reminder that her journey was part of a larger story of courage and transformation. The breaking point, once a moment of despair, had become a crucible forging a deeper, more resilient self. Rebuilding trust. The aftermath of Emily Harper's breaking point marked the beginning of a difficult yet vital phase, rebuilding trust, both with herself and with those around her. The pause she had taken from the project allowed her to reflect deeply on the mistakes made, the expectations set too high, and the relationships that had frayed under the relentless pressure. When Emily returned, it was clear that trust could not be assumed. It had to be earned anew through transparency, humility, and consistent action. Within the team, skepticism lingered. Some members had grown weary of setbacks and the intensity of the project's demands. Emily knew that regaining their confidence required more than promises, it demanded clear communication and a collaborative spirit. She called a series of open meetings where everyone was encouraged to voice concerns, share ideas, and discuss ways to improve not just the project but their working environment. These gatherings revealed unspoken frustrations and creative solutions, fostering a renewed sense of partnership. Emily made a conscious effort to share both successes and failures honestly, dismantling the fear of judgment that had hindered innovation. Outside the team, rebuilding trust with investors and community partners was equally crucial. Emily and Laura crafted transparent reports that detailed progress, challenges, and future plans, emphasizing accountability and openness. They organized community forums where residents could ask questions, express hopes, and engage directly with the project's goals. This approach shifted the narrative from one of uncertainty to one of shared ownership and mutual respect. On a personal level, Emily reached out to friends and family she had unintentionally distanced. Visits with Susan became more frequent and meaningful, each moment underscoring the importance of love and presence. Emily also sought to reconcile with Mark, not to rekindle a past relationship, but to find closure and peace. Their conversations were honest and tender, allowing wounds to heal and forgiveness to take root. Through these efforts, Emily discovered that trust was not a fragile commodity but a living bond nurtured by empathy and effort. She began to understand that vulnerability was a bridge rather than a barrier, inviting others to connect authentically. As trust grew, so did the project's momentum. The team's collaboration flourished, bringing innovative ideas that accelerated development. A critical breakthrough in efficiency reduced costs and increased the technology's accessibility. Investors responded with renewed enthusiasm, and media coverage highlighted the project's community-centered approach. One poignant moment occurred during a community event celebrating the installation of solar panels in a low-income neighborhood. Emily spoke openly about the journey, the setbacks, the learning, and the shared triumphs. The applause and heartfelt thanks from residents were a testament to the power of trust and collaboration. That night, as Emily stood beneath the same vast sky she had gazed at so many times before, she felt a profound gratitude. The stars, once distant points of light, now symbolized the connections she had rebuilt and the hope that illuminated the path ahead. The chapter closed on a note of quiet strength, with Emily whispering a promise to herself, to honor the trust given to her by living with integrity, compassion, and courage. Rebuilding trust was not a single act but an ongoing commitment, one that would continue to shape her story in the chapters yet to come. Emily Harper stood behind the curtain of the convention stage, clutching her note cards, though she knew the words by heart. The National Conference on Sustainable Innovation was her biggest platform yet. The spotlight waiting for her wasn't just bright, it was scorching. Industry leaders, academics, students, and investors filled the massive hall. Her name had drawn them in, her story now a symbol of grassroots brilliance. But for Emily, this moment wasn't about recognition. It was about finally using her voice, for herself, for her team, and for every underdog who'd ever been told they weren't enough. As her introduction echoed through the speakers, Emily stepped into the lights with steady breath and straight shoulders. She began not with the invention or the data, but with her story. About the morning her car broke down on the way to her third waitress shift of the week. About the quiet heartbreak of watching her mother fade. About the note left by a stranger named Elon Musk, and how it pulled her out of survival mode into a chase for something greater. The audience leaned in, drawn not just to the innovation but to the conviction in her voice. She described the solar prototype's evolution, the rural schools it powered, the families now saving money on their electricity bills. But then Emily shifted, her tone deepening. She spoke of burnout, of toxic perfectionism, of leaders who break in silence. She called out the dangerous myth that success must come at the cost of humanity. If innovation doesn't heal, she said, then it's just noise. And noise doesn't light homes or mend broken hearts. The room fell silent. Then came a standing ovation, genuine, not polite. And it was more than applause. It was validation, not just for her product but for her message. Backstage, Lara was waiting, tears in her eyes. "You didn't just present," she whispered. "You gave them permission to be real." That speech marked a turning point. Invitations poured in not just for the technology but for Emily's leadership voice. She began guest lecturing at universities, joining roundtables on sustainable equity, and mentoring other young entrepreneurs. But Emily was careful. She turned down more opportunities than she accepted. She had learned that every yes came with a cost, and she had no intention of losing herself again. Back at home, Susan's condition plateaued. Though her body was frail, her spirit remained sharp. She watched Emily's conference speech from her hospital bed, smiling through proud tears. "You always had that voice," she told her daughter afterward. "Even when you didn't know it." Their conversations took on a new richness in those quiet evenings together. Susan asked questions about Emily's work, about the people she met, about the future. Emily answered everything, not hiding the struggles or dressing up the victories. Their relationship deepened, forged in honesty and gratitude. In the middle of this rise, a surprising letter arrived. It was from a high school student in Kansas named Kaylee, who had read an article about Emily in a class assignment. The letter was handwritten, full of emotion. "I didn't know someone like me could do something like that," it said. "You make me want to try." That letter changed something in Emily. She realized her story had become bigger than herself, that she was now a mirror in which others saw their own potential. And with that came a responsibility, not to be perfect, but to be authentic, to keep showing up even when it was hard. Soon after, Emily and Lara launched an initiative they called Voices in the Dark. A mentorship and grant program for young innovators from low-income or overlooked communities. They partnered with schools and local governments, offering not just funds, but mentorship, tools, and belief. Emily visited some of these towns personally, sitting in cafeterias and rec centers, telling her story not from a stage but eye to eye, soul to soul. At one of those stops, in a fading Midwest town not unlike her own, a young boy tugged at her sleeve and asked, "Did you ever think about giving up?" Emily crouched beside him and nodded. "All the time," she said. "But I had people who reminded me I wasn't alone. Sometimes, that's all we need to keep going." The impact was tangible. Projects bloomed. Kids with big ideas found their footing. Communities once overlooked began to believe in their own worth again. And through it all, Emily kept returning to the same grounding truth: her voice was her power. Not because it was loud or polished, but because it was honest. As Chapter 14 drew to a close, Emily stood on the roof of the renovated diner her aunt had left behind, now transformed into a community tech hub. The neon sign still flickered, but the inside buzzed with life, students tinkering with prototypes, laughter spilling through the doors, music in the background. She looked up at the sky, stars sharp and endless above her. This time, she wasn't wondering how far away they were. She was wondering how many people out there just needed a spark to begin their own rise. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, another request for a keynote, another article asking for a quote. Emily smiled, tucking it away for later. Tonight wasn't for headlines. Tonight was for remembering the waitress who once believed she had nothing to offer. And for the woman she'd become, who learned that a voice, used with courage, can light the darkest places. For all the triumphs Emily Harper had experienced, success carried shadows she hadn't anticipated. With her name becoming synonymous with innovation and grit, a growing undercurrent of scrutiny began to swirl around her. Praise was now tempered by skepticism. Every decision she made, every delay in rollout, every new partner added to the board, was met with questions, not just of strategy, but of integrity. It began with an investigative journalist's op-ed in a national tech publication. The piece wasn't overtly hostile, but it painted Emily as a charismatic face of a movement she may no longer fully control. It questioned how much of the project's original grassroots mission had survived the recent scale-up and posed uncomfortable comparisons to other visionaries who had lost their way after sudden success. Emily read the article 3 times in silence, her face blank, her chest burning. She'd spent every waking moment trying to grow this movement responsibly, carefully balancing expansion with the core values that had launched it. And still, it wasn't enough to silence doubt. Lara tried to reassure her. "You're shaking the world, Emily. People will try to define you, reduce you, pull you apart just to feel in control." But Emily couldn't shake the article's closing line, "When people rise too fast, we stop cheering and start watching for the fall." The criticism seeped into her meetings. Investors began to ask more aggressive questions, cloaking mistrust behind their friendly handshakes. New potential partners started requesting oversight clauses, clearly nervous about the project's direction. Even some members of the team she had led for months now seemed guarded, their smiles tighter, their voices more measured. One engineer, who had worked on the original prototype, tendered her resignation, citing directional misalignment. Emily tried to stay composed, but at night, lying awake in her too quiet apartment, the cracks began to widen. The loneliness returned, sharper than before. Now it wasn't just the absence of people that stung, it was the doubt that maybe the story others were telling about her wasn't just a fabrication. Maybe, somehow, she was becoming something she hadn't intended to be. In the middle of this unraveling, Susan's condition took a turn for the worse. The doctors were kind but honest, there wasn't much time left. Emily sat beside her mother's hospital bed, holding her hand, her world shrinking to the soft beeps of machines and the rasp of quiet breathing. "I saw that article," Susan whispered one night, her voice barely audible. "They don't know who you are." Emily said nothing. Susan's hand, though frail, squeezed hers with sudden strength. "You built something real. You helped people. Don't let the noise steal your truth." Those words hit deep. Emily stayed at the hospital for 3 days straight, canceling meetings, unplugging from the constant buzz. When Susan passed peacefully in her sleep, Emily didn't cry right away. She just sat there, feeling every ounce of grief settle into her chest, folding around her bones like lead. The funeral was small and quiet, just as Susan had wanted. Friends, community members, former co-workers from the diner, all gathered in humble remembrance. It was there, in the shared silence and soft embraces, that Emily rediscovered a flicker of clarity. The people in that room didn't know her because of the headlines or the speeches. They knew her because of the late-night conversations in hospital hallways, the free meals she'd given at the diner, the child she had once been riding her bike through the neighborhood with scraped knees and big dreams. Their love wasn't performative. It was rooted. And it reminded her of something critical: real impact isn't loud. It's lived. In the weeks that followed, Emily stopped chasing approval. She refocused the project's mission, cutting ties with a flashy corporate sponsor that had recently tried to steer them toward profit over purpose. It was a controversial move, one that lost them short-term funding, but gained back the loyalty of grassroots supporters and longtime collaborators who had feared the project was slipping away from its roots. She restructured the mentorship initiative, expanding it beyond technology into community storytelling. Young people weren't just building things, they were sharing their own origin stories, empowering others to do the same. Emily sat in the back of those sessions, listening more than speaking, learning all over again that the most powerful voices often come from the quietest corners. One evening, she received another letter, this time from the same journalist who'd written the op-ed. It was an apology, or something close to it. The tone was more reflective. He admitted he hadn't anticipated the overwhelming response from people who pushed back on his portrayal. "You've clearly struck something deeper," he wrote. "You're not just building tech, you're changing how people believe in themselves. I didn't see that before. I do now." Emily didn't gloat. She didn't even respond. She just closed the laptop, stepped outside, and took a deep breath of crisp evening air. The sky above stretched wide and wild, stars scattered across it like a promise. There would always be shadows. But light, real light, never begged to be seen. It simply shone. 3 months had passed since the funeral, yet Emily Harper still caught herself looking at her phone, half expecting to see a text from her mother. Sometimes, in the quiet before dawn, she'd open the voice memos app just to listen to old recordings, brief messages Susan had left about groceries or doctor's appointments. They weren't profound, but they were her mother's voice. Proof that once, she had been here. Now, Emily stood in her childhood home surrounded by boxes of memories, each one whispering stories from a life that was no longer just hers to carry, but hers to honor. She had come home not just to clean up, but to ground herself. The project had resumed with new direction and purpose, but Emily felt an ache that no progress could ease. She needed to reconnect with her roots, the place where everything began, before innovation, before success, before Elon Musk's note, before anything that resembled this new life. While sorting through an old chest in the attic, Emily found something she wasn't expecting, a sealed envelope with her name written in her mother's neat cursive. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter dated 2 years earlier, written not for any occasion, just as a mother's insurance against time. "Emily, if you're reading this, I've already said most of what I needed to, but some things deserve paper. I want you to know how proud I am, not just of your work, but of your heart. You've always cared too deeply for your own good. It's what makes you powerful. But please remember, the world doesn't need you to be perfect, it needs you to be present. Keep your light. Even when people try to dim it. Even when you want to walk away. And if you ever wonder who you are, come home. Not just here. Come home to yourself." Emily folded the letter slowly, eyes wet but clear. Her mother had always known the truth before Emily could see it. That drive, that endless striving, had never been about changing the world, it had been about proving she belonged in it. But Susan had seen her daughter clearly. And now, Emily saw herself too. That night, she sat at the kitchen table with a notebook and began writing, not a pitch, not a grant application, not a speech, but a story. Her story. The full version, the real version. She wrote about waiting tables and hiding overdue bills in drawers. About the night she almost gave up. About the note on a billionaire's check and what it meant to believe in someone who didn't yet believe in herself. She wrote through the night, words pouring from a place deeper than memory, something closer to truth. In the morning, she called Laura. "I'm writing something," she said. "A report?" "No. A book." Laura didn't hesitate. "You should. People need it." It wasn't about ego. It was about legacy. Emily had come to understand that her story could outlive her if she told it right, not to make herself larger, but to give others a map for rising from rock bottom. She wanted the kids in the community tech hubs, the single parents holding on by a thread, the dreamers cleaning tables and fixing wires in garages, to see a reflection of themselves and know they weren't alone. Over the next few weeks, she split her time between the project's relaunch and the manuscript. The more she wrote, the more she realized how much healing she still had to do. But the process became cathartic. She revisited every high and low with honesty. She wrote about Mark, about her failures, about the exhaustion that nearly swallowed her whole. But she also wrote about laughter with Lara in hotel rooms, about the school children who danced beneath solar-lit gym lights, about watching the sunrise with her mother on mornings when everything else felt like too much. The manuscript's first draft was raw, imperfect, but unmistakably hers. She sent it to a small publisher recommended by an old mentor and braced for indifference. But the response was immediate and emotional. They loved it. They wanted it. And they didn't want to change a word. The book, titled Lightkeeper, How One Note Changed Everything, was set to publish the following spring. As word of it spread, new doors opened, speaking engagements with educators, interviews with outlets that had once dismissed her, and, more importantly, letters. So many letters. From waitresses. From inventors. From people just trying to get through the day. People who saw in Emily's messy, honest journey a permission slip to keep going. One letter came from a teenage girl in Mississippi who had been building wind-powered water filters in her backyard. "I didn't think my ideas mattered," she wrote, "until I read your story. Now I believe they do." Emily carried that letter in her bag, along with her mother's. On hard days, she pulled them out like armor. And the project? It was thriving. Reinvigorated by a deeper sense of purpose and protected from the corporate dilution that once threatened its core. Community solar was becoming more than a pilot, it was a movement. Neighborhoods that had once been neglected were now leading in innovation. The people who had once stood in long lines just to afford their electricity were now mentors, builders, educators in their own right. As the year drew to a close, Emily stood before a crowd in a small Tennessee town that had just completed its own energy transition with the help of her team. This time, there were no big screens, no live streams, just a microphone, a few folding chairs, and a group of people who had never stopped believing in better. She told them about her mother. About the attic letter. About the importance of knowing when to push and when to pause. She told them that success wasn't an endpoint but a rhythm: rise, fall, reflect, rise again. As the crowd clapped and the evening sun dipped behind the hills, a girl in the front row raised her hand and asked, "What if I'm scared to start?" Emily smiled. "Start scared," she said. "But start." She stepped down from the platform, the wind catching her hair, the sky above streaked with gold and pink. She didn't feel finished. But she no longer felt lost. This was legacy. Not fame. Not headlines. But passing the torch in the dark and whispering, "You can do this too." Emily's life was beginning to settle into a new rhythm, one balanced between the growing impact of her project and the quiet moments she reserved for herself. The book draft was finished and sent off to the publisher, and the community initiative was gaining steady traction. Yet, despite the progress, a persistent feeling lingered, like she was still searching for something undefined, a missing piece she couldn't name. One chilly autumn afternoon, she received an email from an unexpected source, Dr. Henry Caldwell, a retired professor and renowned environmental scientist whose work had shaped much of the sustainability movement decades earlier. His note was brief but sincere: "Ms. Harper, your work and story have reached me. I see in you a kindred spirit, and I would be honored to meet and share what I have learned. There is much to pass on, if you're willing." Emily's heart quickened. She knew Dr. Caldwell by reputation but had never imagined he'd reach out to her personally. She replied immediately, arranging a meeting at a local cafe where they could talk without distractions. The day of the meeting, Emily arrived early, nerves buzzing beneath her composed exterior. When Dr. Caldwell entered, he was a small man with a white beard and sharp eyes, carrying a worn leather satchel. His handshake was firm but gentle. They sat down, ordered coffee, and the conversation began. Dr. Caldwell spoke of a lifetime dedicated to the planet's well-being, battles fought in lecture halls and legislative chambers, victories won and compromises made. He told Emily stories of early solar experiments, the skepticism they faced, and the loneliness that often accompanied pioneering work. But more than the science, he emphasized the importance of mentorship and legacy, how knowledge passed between generations could change the course of history. Emily listened, absorbing every word. Here was a man who had walked the path she was just beginning to navigate. He asked about her project, her challenges, and her fears. When she confessed the pressure to constantly perform and the loneliness of leadership, he nodded knowingly. "You're carrying more than just a mission," he said softly. "You're carrying hopes, fears, expectations, all the invisible weights we seldom speak of. It's why mentorship matters. Not just for skills, but for soul." Their meetings became a weekly ritual. Dr. Caldwell didn't offer easy answers but posed thoughtful questions that made Emily rethink her approach to leadership and innovation. He challenged her to consider the long-term impact of her work on communities, ecosystems, and even future generations. He urged her to cultivate patience and humility alongside ambition. One afternoon, as golden leaves drifted outside the cafe window, Dr. Caldwell handed Emily an old, dog-eared journal. "This was my mentor's," he said. "Filled with notes, reflections, failures, and breakthroughs. It reminded me that progress is a messy, human process. Maybe it'll help you, too." Emily clutched the journal like a treasure. Inside were sketches, data, and personal musings dating back decades. But more than that, the pages revealed the raw humanity behind scientific pursuit, the doubts, the moments of despair and hope intertwined. Inspired, Emily began journaling again, something she had abandoned in the rush of her work. Writing allowed her to untangle complex feelings and chart her growth beyond metrics and milestones. Meanwhile, the mentorship with Dr. Caldwell sparked a new initiative within her project, Wisdom Circles, gatherings where young innovators and seasoned experts met to exchange knowledge, stories, and strategies. Emily saw firsthand how bridging generations could deepen understanding and fuel creativity. At one such gathering, a young engineer named Jamal shared his frustration about funding challenges and community resistance. An older activist offered advice grounded in decades of grassroots organizing. A conversation sparked about balancing innovation with social justice. Emily realized this was more than networking, it was healing a fractured field. As the months passed, Emily noticed a subtle shift within herself. The relentless urgency softened into thoughtful purpose. She became less reactive to criticism, more grounded in her values. When challenges arose, she faced them not alone but with a growing community of support and shared wisdom. One evening, after a particularly long session at a wisdom circle, Emily and Dr. Caldwell walked through a park lined with lanterns glowing softly in the dusk. The air was crisp, the sky clear and full of stars. Dr. Caldwell stopped and looked at her. "You're becoming the leader you were meant to be," he said. "Not because you have all the answers, but because you are willing to learn, to listen, and to lead with your whole heart." Emily smiled, the weight inside her lightening. "Thank you, for seeing me, for believing even when I doubted." He placed a hand on her shoulder. "Remember, Emily, legacy is not just what you build. It's what you inspire in others to build after you." With Dr. Caldwell's mentorship breathing new life into her vision and the community growing stronger by the day, Emily felt a renewed sense of hope. But in the world of innovation and sustainability, hope often came with a price, and for Emily, that price arrived in the form of an unexpected investor's offer that threatened to shake the foundations of everything she had built. It happened one crisp morning when Emily was meeting with Laura and Jamal at their usual cafe, discussing the latest progress on the solar initiative. The door chimed, and in walked a sharply dressed man in his early 40s with a confident smile. He introduced himself as Richard Bennett, a venture capitalist known for funding green technologies. Richard's reputation was a mix of brilliance and controversy. He had a history of aggressive deals that sometimes left communities feeling sidelined. Richard got straight to the point. "Emily, I've been following your project. What you're doing is impressive, but I see even bigger potential, if you're open to scaling fast. My firm can offer significant capital to accelerate your expansion nationwide." Emily exchanged a glance with Laura, who raised an eyebrow but stayed silent. Jamal looked cautiously intrigued. Richard continued, with proper funding and connections, we can take this beyond pilot programs. Imagine every underserved community in America powered by affordable, clean energy within 5 years. On the surface, the offer was a dream: rapid growth, broader impact, more resources. But Emily's gut warned her. Richard's tone carried an unspoken assumption: growth at any cost. She thought of her mother's letter, Dr. Caldwell's lessons, and the community roots that had nurtured this project. Could she risk losing that? Thank you, Richard, Emily said carefully. Your offer is generous, but I'm concerned about maintaining our mission's integrity. I want to ensure communities stay at the heart of every decision, not just profits. Richard smiled politely but pressed on, I understand your concerns. But we can structure the deal to protect those values while scaling efficiently. Sometimes, tough decisions are necessary for real change. The conversation ended with a promise to draft a proposal, and Emily left the cafe with a storm swirling in her chest. That night, she laid awake, wrestling with a question that now dominated her mind. How far was she willing to compromise to achieve her vision? The next week was a whirlwind of meetings, both internal and external. Her core team was divided, some excited by the funding's potential, others wary of the strings attached. Jamal spoke passionately about grassroots empowerment and the risk of losing community trust. Laura urged caution, reminding Emily of the battles they had fought to reclaim the project's soul after past corporate pressures. Emily sought Dr. Caldwell's advice. They met in the old cafe, where the scientist's calm presence helped her find clarity. Growth is important, yes, he said, but growth without roots is like a tree in a storm. It will fall. Your true strength lies in the community you serve, not just the dollars you raise. Armed with renewed conviction, Emily arranged a town hall meeting in one of the project's pilot neighborhoods to discuss the investment opportunity openly. The room was packed. Residents, local leaders, volunteers, and skeptics alike. Emily explained the offer, the potential benefits, and the risks. She invited questions, objections, and ideas. Voices rose, emotions ran high. A grandmother worried about rent increases if the area became too developed. A young mother feared losing control over decisions that affected her children's future. Others saw the chance for jobs and better infrastructure. After hours of dialogue, a consensus emerged: they would consider investment only if community oversight was guaranteed, profits were reinvested locally, and transparency was non-negotiable. Emily drafted a new proposal reflecting those conditions. When she presented it to Richard, he hesitated, then agreed, though with a warning that the deal would be slower and more complex. Emily accepted. She knew the path wouldn't be easy, but it was the one she was willing to take. As negotiations dragged on, Emily faced mounting pressure, from investors eager for rapid returns, from media hungry for sensational headlines, and from her own team questioning if they could truly balance scale with soul. Yet, through it all, she remained grounded by the community's unwavering support and the mentorship guiding her steps. One evening, while reviewing the contract draft, Emily received an unexpected text, a photo of a worn, handwritten note attached to a check from a small diner in a rural town, signed by a waitress who had once served Elon Musk, the same note that had changed her life. The message read simply, "Keep believing, Emily. You're not alone." Tears blurred her vision. In that moment, she realized her journey wasn't just about innovation or funding, it was about connection, resilience, and the power of a single note to ignite change. The days following the investor deal were some of the most intense Emily had ever faced. The new agreement brought in significant capital, yet it also ushered in increased scrutiny and expectations. The delicate balance she had fought so hard to maintain between growth and community trust suddenly felt like walking a tightrope in a storm. Tensions flared within the team. Laura, once her closest ally, grew distant, frustrated by compromises Emily was willing to make. Jamal, always the voice of the grassroots, spoke openly about feeling sidelined as corporate interests infiltrated their meetings. Meetings that used to be vibrant and collaborative turned into battlegrounds of ideals and pragmatism. Emily felt herself pulled in every direction, the weight of leadership heavier than ever before. One afternoon, after a particularly heated meeting where a budget cut targeted community education programs, Laura confronted Emily in the hallway. "Emily, I'm worried you're losing sight of why we started this. The people we serve aren't just numbers or assets. They're lives." Emily's throat tightened. "I know, Laura. But without funding, we can't keep this going at all. You're making deals that put us on shaky ground. What if this all falls apart? Who's going to be left to pick up the pieces?" The word stung, but Emily knew Laura spoke from a place of love and fear. Still, the rift between them widened, and Emily felt isolated in her decisions. That evening, Emily reached out to Dr. Caldwell, seeking guidance. Over tea in his cozy study lined with books and plants, he listened patiently to her doubts and struggles. "Leadership is lonely," he said quietly. "But it's also about forgiveness, of others, and of yourself. You can't carry the burden of everyone's expectations, Emily. Sometimes, you must accept imperfection and keep moving forward." Inspired by his wisdom, Emily sent Laura a heartfelt message, inviting her to meet and talk honestly. They met at a small park bench under fading autumn leaves, the air crisp and honest. Tears came easily as they shared their frustrations, fears, and hopes. They admitted mistakes and reaffirmed their shared purpose. "I don't want to lose what we built," Emily said, voice trembling. "But I need you to hold me accountable, to remind me of the heart when I get lost in the hustle." Laura nodded, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "I'm here. We're in this together." That moment of reconciliation rekindled Emily's strength. She realized leadership wasn't about perfection but resilience, the courage to face fractures and mend them. The community, sensing the tension, held their own conversations. Some worried about the changes, others remained hopeful. Emily organized open forums to listen and respond, ensuring no voice was ignored. Slowly, trust rebuilt like the gentle growth of spring after a harsh winter. Amid these challenges, Emily found unexpected moments of joy. One afternoon, Jamal surprised her with a prototype of a solar-powered water pump designed by local youth. Their pride and ingenuity reminded her why the struggle was worth it. Emily also deepened her personal reflection. Journaling daily, she processed the waves of emotion that came with leadership, the doubt, the hope, the guilt, and the triumph. She realized that forgiveness was a gift she needed to give herself, to let go of unrealistic expectations and embrace the messy, beautiful reality of change. As the chapter closed, Emily stood once again on the porch of her childhood home, the sky painted with dusk's soft hues. The road ahead was uncertain, and the fractures in her team were real, but so was the healing. She had learned that sometimes, the most profound growth comes not from smooth paths but from weathering storms and forgiving the cracks along the way. The journey continued, with all its imperfections, all its promise, and Emily was ready to walk it, heart open, and soul steady. Just as Emily began to feel a fragile stability returning to her project and team, an unexpected crisis struck, threatening to undo months of hard work and testing her resolve in ways she had never imagined. It was a storm, not of weather, but of public opinion and trust, that threatened to engulf everything she had built. The first sign came as a late-night call from Jamal, his voice tense and urgent. "Emily, there's something you need to see, social media is blowing up." Some local news outlet ran a story accusing us of mishandling funds, of prioritizing profits over the community. People are outraged. Donations are drying up, and volunteers are pulling back. Emily's stomach dropped. She knew these accusations were unfounded, proof of transparency and community investment were central pillars of the project, but rumors spread fast, and fear even faster. The next morning, she faced a barrage of questions from her team and stakeholders. The community forums she once held with hope and openness now filled with skepticism and anger. Town halls erupted in heated debates, with longtime supporters demanding answers and accountability. The news outlet's article had been based on a misinterpreted financial report from a complex investor document, twisted by a sensationalist headline. Yet, the damage was done. Emily worked relentlessly to address the crisis. She gathered her team, including Laura and Jamal, to prepare a clear, honest response and organize a public transparency campaign. They held press conferences, released detailed financial reports, and invited community leaders to audit the project's books. Despite the efforts, the emotional toll was immense. Emily often found herself awake at night, replaying conversations and questioning if she had done enough to prevent the fallout. Doubts crept in. Had she trusted the wrong people? Had the investor deal compromised their integrity? Dr. Caldwell's steady voice was a lifeline. Crises are inevitable, Emily, he reminded her during one long phone call. What defines a leader is not the absence of mistakes, but the courage to face them, learn, and rebuild. The community's response was mixed. Some rallied around her, inspired by her transparency and commitment. Others remained skeptical, their trust shaken. Emily realized that rebuilding trust was not a quick fix but a slow, patient process requiring consistency and humility. Amid the chaos, Emily found solace in small moments. A heartfelt letter from a volunteer thanking her for fighting through adversity, a message from a family benefiting from the solar program, a quiet walk in the park to clear her mind. One day, Jamal approached her with a proposal, a community-led watchdog committee to oversee finances and decisions, giving residents a direct voice in governance. It was a bold idea, and Emily embraced it, seeing it as a vital step toward healing. Months passed. Slowly, the storm began to abate. Donations resumed, and volunteers returned. The media's tone softened as follow-up reports cleared the project of wrongdoing. More importantly, the community felt heard and empowered. The crisis, while painful, had sparked growth, making the project more transparent, inclusive, and resilient. Emily emerged more determined and wiser, understanding that leadership was not about controlling every outcome but about embracing vulnerability and fostering collective strength. As Chapter 20 ended, Emily stood before a gathering in the same community center where the storm had once raged. Her voice was steady as she spoke about lessons learned, the power of forgiveness, and the importance of unity. She looked out at the faces, some worn from struggle, some bright with hope, and knew the journey was far from over. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a deep, unshakable confidence. Together, they could face whatever came next. In the weeks following the crisis, Emily found herself more determined than ever to ensure the sustainability and integrity of her project. The community's trust, once shaken, was gradually being rebuilt through transparency, accountability, and open dialogue. Yet, Emily knew that healing would not be enough without fresh momentum and new resources to push the initiative forward. One afternoon, while reviewing emails, Emily received a message from a nonprofit organization called Green Roots, focused on environmental justice and community empowerment across the United States. The email was from their executive director, Maria Sanchez, who had heard about Emily's work through a mutual connection. Maria expressed admiration for Emily's approach and suggested a partnership that could amplify their collective impact. Emily was intrigued. Green Roots had a strong reputation for grassroots organizing and policy advocacy, areas that complemented her technical and entrepreneurial background. She responded enthusiastically, and soon a meeting was arranged. The first meeting with Maria and her team was electric with possibility. Maria was a charismatic woman with a fierce passion for justice and equity. She spoke candidly about the challenges facing marginalized communities and the urgent need to integrate environmental sustainability with social empowerment. "We can't just bring technology to communities," Maria said firmly. "We have to build power alongside it, help people claim ownership of their futures." Emily shared her vision and the recent struggles, including the investor deal and the crisis. Maria nodded empathetically, offering fresh perspectives on balancing growth with community autonomy. They discussed joint projects, community workshops, leadership training, and policy campaigns, each designed to deepen the roots of the initiative while expanding its reach. The idea of co-creating a community empowerment hub where residents could access resources, training, and support became a shared goal. Over the next few months, the partnership blossomed. Green Roots brought experienced organizers, connections to local activists, and a network of community leaders. Emily's team contributed technology, funding, and program management expertise. Together, they hosted vibrant events filled with energy and hope. One highlight was a summer festival celebrating sustainability and culture. The event featured solar-powered music stages, local food vendors, art installations, and workshops on everything from urban gardening to renewable energy basics. Families, elders, youth, and newcomers mingled, shared stories, and dreamed together. Emily watched the festival unfold with a swelling heart. This was what she had always hoped for, a movement rooted in connection, resilience, and joy. But the partnership wasn't without challenges. Differences in approach sometimes sparked tension. Emily's team leaned toward structured timelines and measurable outcomes, while Green Roots prioritized organic growth and community-led decision-making. Navigating these dynamics required patience, compromise, and ongoing communication. Dr. Caldwell's voice echoed in Emily's mind, "Leadership is a dance between holding your vision and listening deeply." Emily embraced that wisdom as they crafted a shared governance model for the new initiatives, blending structure with flexibility and ensuring community voices remained central. Meanwhile, the investor remained involved but now with clearer boundaries and a renewed commitment to social responsibility, thanks in part to the strengthened community oversight mechanisms. As the chapter closed, Emily found herself reflecting on how far she had come, from the waitress who once served Elon Musk to the leader at the heart of a growing movement. The journey had been tumultuous, filled with unexpected mentors, painful lessons, and moments of profound joy. Now, with Green Roots by her side and a community empowered to lead, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose and possibility. The road ahead was still long and uncertain, but she knew she was not alone. Together, they were building not just a project, but a future worth fighting for. Just as the partnership with Green Roots began to show promising results, an unexpected setback threw Emily's plans into turmoil, testing the resilience of the entire movement. It started quietly, a rumor about a proposed city ordinance that threatened to limit community solar projects in certain neighborhoods. At first, Emily thought it was just another bureaucratic hurdle, something her team could navigate with proper advocacy and public awareness. But the reality was more complex and far more threatening. The ordinance aimed to restrict installations based on zoning changes influenced by powerful real estate interests. Developers were lobbying to push through projects that favored luxury housing over affordable, sustainable community initiatives like Emily's. The language in the proposal was technical and dense, making it difficult for most residents to grasp the full implications until it was nearly too late. Emily first heard about the ordinance during a city council meeting where she was invited to speak. The room was filled with officials, developers, activists, and concerned citizens. As she prepared to present the benefits of the community solar program, she noticed tension in the air. Opponents argued the program was outdated, expensive, and impeded economic development. After the meeting, she learned from Maria that the ordinance was part of a larger push to reshape the city's growth trajectory, one that prioritized profit over people and sustainability. This revelation hit hard. The very neighborhoods she and her team had worked so hard to empower were now at risk of being sidelined by policy decisions made without their input. Emily quickly mobilized her team and Green Roots to organize a coalition of community members, local nonprofits, environmental groups, and even sympathetic business owners to fight back. They launched an urgent campaign to raise awareness, gather signatures, and pressure city council members to reconsider the ordinance. The effort required every ounce of Emily's leadership. Coordinating rallies, crafting persuasive communications, and fostering unity among diverse stakeholders was exhausting. Yet, it also rekindled the spirit that had driven her from the very beginning, the belief that collective action could move mountains. Amid the chaos, Emily's relationship with Laura deepened as they co-led grassroots organizing efforts. Jamal worked tirelessly to connect with youth groups and local media, ensuring the campaign reached every corner of the community. Despite their dedication, the fight was uphill. Powerful interests wielded significant influence, and some council members seemed swayed by promises of economic growth tied to the ordinance. Doubts crept in among the coalition members. Some questioned if they had the power to change the system. One evening, after a particularly discouraging strategy session, Emily sat alone on the rooftop of her office building, staring at the city skyline. The weight of the moment pressed down on her. Was this the end of their dreams? Had the compromise she once accepted now come back to haunt her? Her phone buzzed, a message from Maria: "Remember why we fight. We're more than a project, we're a movement. This is the moment to rise." Those words reignited a fire within her. The next day, Emily spoke at a packed community forum, her voice steady and passionate. She shared stories of families who had benefited, of children who now studied under solar-powered lights, of neighbors who found hope in clean energy. Her speech wasn't just a call to action, it was a reminder of what was at stake, a future where communities shaped their destiny, not external forces. Slowly, momentum shifted. Media coverage grew sympathetic, council members faced mounting pressure, and the coalition's message resonated beyond the city limits. Weeks later, the city council voted to revise the ordinance, incorporating protections for community solar projects and mandating community input in future zoning decisions. It was a hard-fought victory but a crucial one. The setback had tested Emily's leadership and the movement's strength. It exposed the fragility of progress but also the power of solidarity. As Chapter 22 ended, Emily stood among her team and community members, celebrating not just the policy win but the resilience they had built together. She knew more challenges awaited, but the fight had reaffirmed a profound truth: change was possible when people stood united. The journey was far from over, but Emily's resolve burned brighter than ever. The days after the city council's vote felt surreal for Emily and her team. The revised ordinance was a victory, not only for their project but for every community member who had poured their hope and energy into the fight. Yet, Emily knew that true success wasn't measured by a single vote or headline. It was about lasting change, about transforming lives and systems one step at a time. As the dust settled, Emily turned her focus back to the core mission: expanding the solar initiative, deepening community ownership, and ensuring that every voice mattered. The partnership with Green Roots continued to flourish, now stronger and more united after weathering the recent storm. They launched new programs focused on leadership training, youth empowerment, and sustainable development, designed to create a pipeline of future community leaders. One morning, Emily received an invitation to speak at a national conference on sustainable urban development, a platform to share their story and inspire others. The invitation came as a surprise, a recognition of their journey from a small, uncertain start to a movement making real impact. It was also a moment of personal significance, a chance to stand tall in front of a broader audience and tell the story of resilience, community, and hope. Preparing for the conference, Emily reflected on the path that had brought her here. The waitress who once served a famous entrepreneur, the woman who had faced heartbreak and setbacks, the leader who had fought to protect her community, all were threads woven into the fabric of her story. On the day of her speech, Emily stood backstage, heart pounding but steady. She glanced out at the packed auditorium filled with policymakers, activists, academics, and innovators. This was her moment of truth. Not just to share success but to reveal the struggles, the doubts, and the human spirit that fueled their work. Taking the stage, Emily began with a question that had guided her since the beginning: what if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? The room fell silent, hanging on her every word as she recounted the journey, the challenges, the crises, the victories. She spoke candidly about the fractures in her team, the crisis of public trust, the investor deal, and the battle against the city ordinance. But more than that, she shared the lessons learned, the power of forgiveness, the importance of community ownership, and the strength found in vulnerability. Her voice carried the raw emotion of someone who had lived the story, who understood that progress was never linear, and that hope often emerged from the darkest moments. The audience responded with applause, some faces wet with tears, others nodding in recognition. Emily concluded with a call to action: we must build movements rooted in empathy and justice, where every person has a stake and a voice. Because the future belongs to those who dare to believe in change. After the speech, Emily was approached by attendees eager to collaborate, learn, and replicate the model in their own communities. It was a moment of validation and new beginnings. Returning home, Emily felt a deep sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she had proven, to herself and others, that even the most ordinary person could ignite extraordinary change. That night, as she sat by the window watching city lights flicker like stars, she penned a letter to her younger self: "You are stronger than you know. Every setback is a step forward. Keep going." The moment of truth had come and passed, but Emily's journey was far from over. It was only the beginning of a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The glow from the conference lingered in Emily's mind as she returned to the rhythms of daily life and work. Yet beneath the surface of accomplishment, a deeper reckoning was underway. One that forced her to confront her own limits, fears, and the true meaning of leadership. The victories, while sweet, carried with them new responsibilities and unexpected costs. In the weeks that followed, Emily noticed a shift within herself. The exhaustion that had long been tucked away now surfaced, a quiet but persistent weariness that seeped into her nights and clouded her days. The endless demands of leadership, the weight of community expectations, and the constant push to innovate left little room for rest or reflection. One evening, after a marathon meeting with partners and stakeholders, Emily found herself sitting alone in the dim light of her office. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened a box of old letters and photographs, reminders of a past life that sometimes felt like a distant dream. Among them was a note from her mother, written years ago during one of Emily's toughest times: "Remember, my dear, that taking care of yourself is not selfish. You cannot pour from an empty cup." Those words hit her with new clarity. Emily realized she had been running on adrenaline and passion, neglecting her own well-being. She had poured so much into the movement that she had almost forgotten to nurture the person at its heart. The next day, she reached out to Lara and Jamal, confessing her struggles and asking for help in balancing the load. Together, they restructured their roles and introduced wellness practices into their routine: regular check-ins, breaks, and moments of mindfulness. It was a small but vital step toward sustainability, not just of the project but of themselves. At the same time, Emily confronted lingering tensions within the team. The past months had healed some wounds, but others required honest conversations. With courage and humility, she facilitated dialogues about mistakes, unmet expectations, and the shared vision that still bound them. These sessions deepened their trust and strengthened their commitment to one another. On a personal level, Emily also sought reconciliation with her estranged father. Their relationship had been fractured by years of silence and pain, but she realized that healing her past was essential to moving forward. After a tentative exchange of messages, they met in a quiet cafe, speaking openly about regrets, forgiveness, and hopes for the future. The encounter was neither perfect nor easy, but it was real, a renewal of family bonds that mirrored the rebirth happening in her community work. Inspired by these personal transformations, Emily launched a new initiative within the project: Healing Circles, spaces for community members to share stories, confront challenges, and support one another emotionally and spiritually. The response was profound, as neighbors found strength in vulnerability and solidarity. As the chapter closed, Emily stood before a circle of participants one crisp autumn evening, watching faces illuminated by firelight and hope. She felt the truth of her journey settle deeply. Leadership was not about perfection or control but about reckoning with one's own humanity and nurturing the humanity of others. The movement was more than a project, it was a living, breathing community growing through reckoning and renewal, just as she had. As the seasons shifted, Emily felt the full weight and grace of her journey, the woman who once carried uncertainty and doubt now stood firmly rooted in purpose and love. The community she helped build had blossomed into a living testament of resilience, unity, and transformation. More than a solar project or a local initiative, it had become a beacon of hope, a place where people reclaimed their power and envisioned a brighter future together. In the early morning light, Emily often walked through the neighborhood, greeting familiar faces and witnessing the tangible fruits of their labor: solar panels gleaming on rooftops, children learning about renewable energy at the new community empowerment hub, gardens flourishing in formerly neglected lots. These were symbols not just of environmental progress but of human connection and shared dreams. Her relationship with Lara had grown into a profound partnership built on trust, respect, and shared history. Jamal continued to inspire youth through mentorship programs, channeling their energy into activism and creativity. The team felt less like co-workers and more like family, bonded through trials and triumphs. One afternoon, Emily received a letter from a young woman named Ava, who had attended one of the healing circles. Ava wrote of her struggles with addiction and how the support she found in the community gave her strength to seek recovery. Her words moved Emily deeply, proof that their work touched lives in ways beyond measurable outcomes. Reflecting on her past, Emily remembered the day she served Elon Musk, the strange twist of fate that set this journey in motion. At the time, she had no idea how far the road would take her. That night, as she tucked Ava's letter into her journal, she felt a sense of full circle, how small moments could ripple into profound change. Emily also thought about the note Elon left on that check. The encouragement, the belief in potential she barely understood then. It reminded her of the power of kindness, the way a simple gesture can light the path for someone struggling to find their way. With that memory close to her heart, Emily prepared to speak at a local school about her story and the importance of perseverance, empathy, and community. She wanted to inspire the next generation to dream boldly and act courageously. Standing before a room full of curious faces, Emily shared her journey candidly: the setbacks, the heartbreak, the victories, and the lessons learned. She emphasized that life's surprises, both painful and joyful, shape us into who we are meant to be. As she finished, a young girl raised her hand and asked, "What kept you going when everything seemed impossible?" Emily smiled, her eyes shining with honesty. "One thing that always pushed me forward was love, the love for my family, my community, and the hope that together, we could create something better. And sometimes, you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other, even when the road is tough." After the talk, several students and teachers approached her, eager to learn more, to get involved, to share their own stories. Emily felt the baton of hope passing into new hands, the promise of continued growth and change. That evening, as the sun set over the city, Emily sat quietly on her porch, the sounds of laughter and life drifting through the air. She thought about the journey, how far she had come, the people who had walked beside her, the lessons that had shaped her. Life was indeed full of surprises, but love had always been the guiding light. With a heart full of gratitude and a spirit ready for whatever came next, Emily whispered to the night, "This is just the beginning. The story ends here, but the legacy lives on." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?